Hi, I'm Vivian, and I'm going to talk about getting your child to start reading again. When my son was about 8 years old, he had lost interest in reading in favor of video games. So I remember trying to brainstorm to try to figure out how I was going to get him to pick up another book. I would take them to the library every 2 or 3 weeks, and at the time, I think children were allowed 30 books each on their cards, and my daughter would always pick up the maximum 30, and he would struggle to even pick up one. And even if he did check out any books, he wouldn't read them. What we would do is go back to the library, and he would just exchange the ones he didn't read for more books that he would bring home and not read. I didn't want to force him to read it by, punishing him. So we did that, went through that cycle a few times. And eventually I asked the librarian, do you have any ideas on how I can help my son to get him back into reading? And she said, well, why don't you just pick up some books for him and leave them on the counter? Don't tell him to read it. Don't make him pick it up. Don't punish him if he doesn't. And don't make it a thing where it's something you have to argue about, where it's an issue. So I did as she suggested, and I would check out 15 books that I thought that he might like, and every week I would put them on the counter, leave them there, not say one word about it. And I think one time I did even say, oh, did you see those new books that we picked up? Like, there's something really interesting, just to make sure that he saw them. And he didn't care. So I went back to the library and I asked the librarian, hey, what do you think about audiobooks? Should I use that instead of, the physical books? And she thought, well, maybe if you use them in conjunction, it would be just as beneficial. Like, it's like reading out loud. You could sit together, open up the book, and then listen to the audiobook. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try that. Great idea. It's something different. And I would do that. I, had books. I got the audiobooks. I played it. We had the book out in front of us. We even had snacks. And that maybe lasted only a couple times. It still wasn't enough excitement, I guess, for them to, or for my son to want to start reading. What I ended up doing with the audiobooks, though, was I would convert them into a format that I could play on my phone, and then I would connect it to the car audio. And on trips where I had to take them to soccer practice or basketball practice or jiu-jitsu or dance, I would play them in the car, and at least they would get, or my son would get, the 5 to 10 minutes there and back of being read a story. Finally, there was one trip that I took to the library where I talked to him and I said, listen, I think that you would really love it if you found a book that was really interesting for you. Do you want me to help you look, or would you like to look yourself? And he goes, oh, I could look on my own. And I said, well, these are all the fiction books right here. These shelves are lined with fiction books, and this section over here, there's graphic novels. I mean, anything here might be really interesting to you since you love Marvel. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll look. And then he quickly walks up and down every single aisle and comes back to me and says, I've checked every single aisle in this library and there is not one book that's interesting to me. And I said, you've checked every single book on every aisle? Yep. Checked everything. There's not one book that's interesting. I said, well, why don't we go and look at the graphic novel section together? I really think that you might find something that you like there. Oh, I don't think so. I already looked at it. I told you. So I said, well, let's look anyway. And I go over there and I intentionally pick up Spider-Man because he used to love Spider-Man. And I said, well, what about this one? Don't you think this one would be so exciting?
Nope.
That doesn't look interesting to me at all. So after a while, my daughter had already picked out her 30 books. And I was carrying a basket full of books and a little frustrated that he was still not willing to engage. So last ditch effort, I said, why don't we go ask the librarian? Or why don't you go ask her and just tell her what you like? And maybe she can suggest something that would be interesting to you. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. So I said, okay, I'm tired. Let's go home and I'll have Dad bring you back later so that he can go through and help you find a book, or you guys can ask the librarian together. And he's like, no, I don't want to come back. Fine, I'll go ask. So he walks up to the librarian, and I'm about 10 feet away watching him do this. And of course, she asks him questions about what he likes. And then she says, oh, I think I have the perfect book for you. There is a very popular book that many kids love, and I think one just got returned, and it's on the shelving cart in the back. Let me go grab it. You just wait right here. So she disappears for a minute. She comes back with a book, and she hands it to him and says, look, this book called Masterminds is something very popular, and I think you're going to love it. Why don't you come back and tell me what you think? So he takes it. We go downstairs to try to check it out, and he says, see, Mom, I told you it wasn't in any of the shelves that I checked. I checked everything, and this book wasn't on there. So I said, okay, that's fine. We check it out. We come home, and after dinner, he says to me, hey, when are we going to go back to the library again? And I said, why? We were just there today. I didn't know you like going to the library. And he said, no, I already finished that book. And I think it was like this thick. He said, I already finished that book, and I think I have to go back and get the other ones that the same author has written. So, of course, I'm secretly happy that it worked and that he was interested in picking up another couple books to read. And what ended up happening is that, I did take him back. He eventually did read the other books by the same author, and then we got more recommendations, and he read other similar books, and he started to like reading again. So what that reminds me when I think back about that is that forcing a habit doesn't work. What actually does work is helping them find the thing that sparks their interest. And when they do find something they love, then it takes off on its own. You don't have to force anything, and they will find what they love, and they will go back for more.